Hello, welcome for this new video about the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra. Today we will see 3 verses, and the first one begins a new series about bliss. First in Sanskrit, verse 63. Om sarvaṃ dehaṃ cinmayaṃ hi jagad paribhāvayet yugapan nirvikalpena manasā paramodayaḥ. So, paribhāvayet, one should feel completely. Sarvaṃ dehaṃ, all of one's body, the whole body, sarvaṃ dehaṃ. Cinmayaṃ, as being filled with consciousness, as being not made of, but overflowing with consciousness. Pratyancham, says the commentary, each and every part of it. So to feel completely the body completely filled with consciousness. Jagadva, or the world. You remember that in the previous verses we had the body empty, that is filled with consciousness, because here emptiness and consciousness are synonyms. And we had either the body or the world. First the body and the world consumed by the fire of consciousness. And here we have both, or the choice of both. Yugapan, simultaneously, all at once, without sequence, without starting with one part and then with one part. Nirvikalpena is just reinforcing the meaning of the previous word, which means with nirvikalpena manasā, with undivided attention. Here again, manasā I think is better translated by attention than by mind, but in fact it means the same. With undivided mind, with undivided attention. And so, in that way, paramodayaḥ, there shall be the supreme awakening. So here the commentator gives us a quote, which he says is a principle of thought, of reasoning, nyāyat. According to this principle, prakāshaḥ prakāshate iti bhāvayet. One should become familiar, one should realize that consciousness shines. It is in the very nature of consciousness to shine. Prakāshaḥ, the light, literally the light shines. Prakāshaḥ prakāshate. It's always very difficult to translate because in Sanskrit it's quite clear. Prakāshaḥ prakāshate, it's the same verbal root, which makes a noun and a verb, but it's the same root, the same action, the same activity. It's prakash, kash, like in Kashi, the city of light, Varanasi. Shine, to shine, shining. And that quote, prakashamanam na pritak prakashat. So again, here it's very clear in Sanskrit, but very difficult to convey the same clarity in English. So, what is now manifesting, like say that apple, that pot, that vase, that cloth, this and that, what is actually now appearing, what is now manifested, it's hard to say whether it's rather the content or the action of manifesting, but here it's ambiguous, but I think that's deliberate. Prakashamanam, na pritak prakashat, is not separated from the action, from the act, that manifests it. So the object is not separate from the subject. Here it is pointed out that the object, whatever it is, inside, outside, real, unreal, imaginary, whatever, is in fact completely made of the action of that shining that is consciousness. Prakashamanam. The object, the very being of the object is manifesting, is shining. Maybe it's better if we keep as close to the Sanskrit as possible, as literal as possible, even if it sounds strange at first. The object is shining, is a shining. It is made, it consists in a shining, in an action of shining, prakashamanam, actually here now shining. All that is now is shining, whether it is related to the past, to the future, whether it is real or not, whether it is really here or not really here, it's really shining, prakashamanam. And so it's not different from the act of shining, prakashat, which is the very being of consciousness. So in that way, the object is not separate, napritak, is not separate from the subject, from the shining consciousness, the shining that is consciousness, right? The shining, that which is shining, the object shining, is not different, is not separate from the shining, from the light. This is what is said here. Anyatha, otherwise, if we were to suppose that the object is somehow separate from that shining, anyatha chit, anyatha chityamanatva anupapattehi, otherwise it could not be an object of consciousness if it were to be separate from that shining light. If it were, in other words, if the object was separate from the subject, from consciousness, it could never become an object of consciousness, and we would be aware of nothing, and so there would be no awareness, and so there would be nothing, there would not be all that. All that appears because it shines not separated from the shining, and that shining, that very shining, is consciousness. That very shining is consciousness. Prakashamanam na prithak prakashat. Anyatha chetyamanatvanupapati. It could not be an object. It could not have, there could not be the fact of being an object of consciousness if the object was different from the shining light that is consciousness. So in Sanskrit it's clearer because they use the same word. Prakashamanam na prithak prakashat. You see, the thing, they don't even say in Sanskrit the thing that, they say the actual shining is not different from the shining light. The actual shining, that the actual, you see, I feel without I feel prompted to say the thing that is shining, but in Sanskrit it does not really say so. It says the actual shining, the shining now, prakashamanam, the shining now is not different from the shining. This is what it says, and it suggests, while saying so, that prakashamanam means points at the object, and prakashat points at the subject. And by using the same word, because it's possible, it makes sense, it suggests that they're the same, that they're not separate. They are made of the same stuff. They are both shining. Consciousness, the subject is consciousness, the pure shining. And the object, the content, what I am conscious of, is what is shined. What is shined, what is projected like a projector of light by that shining. So really the shining and the shined are two poles within the same act. There is a subject side, there is an object side, but it's the same shining. It is the same light. It's the same manifestation. So nothing that is manifested is separated from manifestation, and manifestation is just another name for consciousness. So nothing is separate from consciousness. Otherwise, nothing would be manifest and there would be nothing. But there is not nothing, there is something, there are many things, so there is a manifestation, and all that is not separated from the very action of manifesting it, and thus nothing is separate from consciousness. This is what one should realize. Iti bhavēt. Next verse, 64. Om vāyudvayasya saṃghaṭṭād antar. Sorry, there is a misprint here. Saṃghaṭṭād antar bahir. It's written antar. My printing is a small mistake. Bahir antataḥ. Well, I will check with the commentary after. Yogi samatvavijñānasamudgamanabhājanam. So anyway, the meaning is clear. By the fusion, saṃghaṭṭād, which has sexual meaning, basically, by the fusion and like two things, saṃghaṭṭād is like doing like that, okay? It's not a fusion just like mixing two liquids, for instance, but it's really like touching each other, like a friction. Vāyudvayasya, of the two winds, the in-breath and the out-breath. So it's like a fusion, a permanent copulation, we could say. Antar bahir antataḥ, antar bahir antataḥ, from the inside to the outside, so in the out-breath, or from the bahir antataḥ, from the outside to the inside, that is the in-breath. Through that fusion in the out-breath or in the out-breath, yogi, the yogi, samatvavijñānasamudgamanabhājanam will come to enjoy. It could also mean a vessel, but I think here it means he will come to enjoy the arising of the knowledge, the direct knowledge, vijnana, of equality. Here we just have another description of that very same practice of paying intense attention to the movement of breath. And through that we become aware of the intervals at the end of the out-breath, at the end of the in-breath, and thus the out-breath and in-breath themselves become more and more faint, and we become more and more aware of those two moments at the end of the out-breath, at the end of the in-breath, when there is neither in-breath, neither out-breath, but a moment of balance, a moment of equality, samatvāṃ, also called khichari samatam, a moment where the energy that is attention or awareness becomes equalized, like in equinox, vishuvat. It becomes balanced, it becomes equal. It's neither out-breath, neither in-breath, neither this, neither that, not day, not night, not taking, not giving. it's not yes, it's not no, it's in between, it's the center. So here again, in the middle of a series of verses about a given topic, we find a verse, one verse, inserted bearing on that topic of breath. And that shows something very important, that the practice of attention to the breath, of paying full attention, not detached attention to the breath, but full attention to the breath, is the core and the basic practice taught by that tantra, by the tantric yoga, by Kaula yoga. This is really the core practice, for we find it at the beginning of that tantra, at the end of that tantra, and again throughout the tantra itself. From time to time we find again and again that practice of paying attention to breath. That shows, I believe, that shows the importance of that practice of listening to the breathing. It is really the basic practice. It starts with that, it ends with that. We will see at the end of the Tantra that practice of listening to the breath, of paying full attention to that breathing, to the breath, is really the heart of the tantric practice, of the tantric yoga. So just the ingoing and outgoing of breath is the support of all types of dualities, of all types of dualism. So by listening to that, it becomes more and more equal. And the surrounding space, the background space, becomes more and more alive. And this is what it means to enjoy equality. So breathing becomes almost faint, almost empty, shunya-kalpam, says the commentator. It becomes, you cannot feel it any longer. It's as if suspended, just like it becomes a subtle vibration, sukshma spandana. Next verse, 65. Om sarvaṃ jagat svadehaṃ svānandabharitaṃ smaret yugapan svaṃṛtenaiva parānandamayo bhavet. So here we have again a verse about one's own body or the world. Sarvaṃ jagat, the whole world, svadehaṃ or one's own body. Smaret, one should keep in mind, one should feel, but continuously smaret. Svānandabharitaṃ, that those, one's own body or the world, are filled with the bliss of the self, filled with the bliss of the self, or one's own bliss. That was called at the beginning Svānanda, when the god answered the goddess, what is the supreme goddess? What is the supreme goddess? So it's the same construction as in the verse 63. Instead, we had sarvaṃ dehaṃ, here we have sarvaṃ jagat, so it's reversed. And all that, instead of sva̱nandabharitaṃ, was cinmayaṃ. But maya, the suffix maya, can also mean filled with, full of, full to the brim. So one should feel one's own body or the world, the whole world, filled with the bliss that is the self, or the bliss that is consciousness, because consciousness is bliss, chidananda, anandam brahma. the absolute is bliss. That's the basic equation. Yugapan, all at once, without parts, without asking the how and the why. Svāmṛtenaiva, through that being filled with the nectar, with the ambrosia of oneself, of the self, by that simple remembrance, that simple presence, smaret, parānandamayo bhavet, one will become overflowing with bliss, with the supreme bliss, with the transcendent bliss, with the bliss which is beyond all causes, which is not ordinary bliss caused by something from this world, but which is beyond. So it's not a bliss which comes from the object of the senses, it's jagad, vishayatmananda. It's a bliss which is freed from the bliss that comes from the objects of the senses. And it's the bliss which is filled, you see, bharitam purnam. And there he quotes, the commentator quotes the famous verse from the Upanishad, if I remember well. Vajjasaneya brahmana shrutehi. Is that the Brihadaranyaka? Maybe. Purnamada purnamidam purnat purnat mudachyate purnasya purnamadaya purnamevavashishyate sarvaṃ dehaṃ cinmayaṃ. Yes. So here we have just the practice of feeling spontaneously, without any outer cause, without any outer mean, that everything is filled with bliss, with the bliss that is consciousness, that consciousness is. There is no other bliss than consciousness, than being, that the pure action of existing, of feeling existence. Feeling existence is feeling bliss. All consciousness is bliss. It's never any pain, even in pain. That's what Kashmir Shaivism teaches. Even in physical pain, even in psychological pain, there is a background of bliss. That is, pain becomes pain at the end when it is related to the other things in the world, for instance, having lost someone. But the root upsurge, the first arising of that pain, at its very root, is pure bliss. And that can be felt if the attention turns back on that pain. And then it will discover, we will discover that pain is at its very root pure bliss, without any other outer cause. The only cause of that bliss is the fact of being, the fact of arising, the fact of existing, the action of creating this kind of ecstasy, the ecstasy of coming to be. So that's all for today. Thank you for your listening, and see you next time.